Welcome all. In this video, we look at the effect a paradigm change or paradigm shift has on a VBE model. So there's a dramatic change, and paradigm means a set way of thinking or working or boundaries within which you work. And once that changes, your whole VBE model changes. And this has been going on for many centuries. But we look at some examples from the last century. You had the petrol engine changing the car market, and then you had the aeroplane coming in, and a whole new VBE model came in place because of flight. So you had airline manufacturing companies, airline transportation companies, and then you had the catering companies catering to the passengers. So it was a whole new VBE model which came up because of flight. And in the case of cars or petrol engine, there was a horse-drawn carriage industry before, and that whole industry vanished because of the petrol engine. So the petrol engine was the paradigm shift, or the flight was the paradigm shift. And then you had similar paradigm shifts over the years. So the transistor in 1953 gave rise to a whole new VBE model of electronics. The internet gave rise to all new companies like Google, Facebook, and so on. Then you have the shipping container, which changed the shipping VBE model. And we'll take a case of a situation where the VBE model can be changed without an effective paradigm shift. And we take the case of Nokia versus Apple. So basically they rearranged some VBE model elements to create a new VBE model. That is what Apple did. So we'll cover those. Now we look at the camera industry, and this was the total camera and film roll in perhaps 1980s or early 90s. And there were no digital cameras then. And you had Kodak, Fuji, Olympus, and a number of companies which made the total camera and film roll market. And they had a value model, a business model, and ecosystem, and they competed in that VBE model. What happened was a paradigm shift happened, and their whole market shrunk. The whole market, their value model came down, and revenues came down. And there were two paradigm shifts at once. The first was a digital shift. So instead of a camera roll, you stored it on a memory stick. And the second was the shift from the camera to the mobile, which changed the market for companies like Olympus and camera manufacturing companies. So the market shrunk by around 80%. Another case here is bookshops, which was dominated by physical bookshops, Barnes and Noble, Borders, and so on. And they had their own VBE model. And this was the total bookshop market or book selling market. It also shrunk. There were three paradigm shifts at once. First was internet viewing. That paradigm shift changed from a physical to a internet viewing kind of model. You could also purchase on the internet, so you didn't need to go to bookshops. And third was the ability, because of these two, to keep a huge inventory. And these three paradigm shifts resulted in a lot of business loss for these companies. And some of them went bankrupt, like Borders. So let's take another example, which is the mobile phone industry. And this was the industry prior to Apple coming in the model. And the prior two cases happened because of a paradigm shift. And this case happened not because of paradigm shift. It happened because of rearranging certain elements of a VBE model. And we'll see how they were done. So this is the story of a 1 horse, 1 mule, and 3 donkey race. So prior to Apple coming in, the mobile phone market was basically you sold a mobile phone and it was a communication device. It also had internet and perhaps it had some browsing and so on. And there were smartphone companies like Sony Ericsson, which had come up with the smartphone and so on. But their VBE model was more or less similar. It was not evolving rapidly. And the 3 donkey race was companies which stuck into the old model of a phone. The 1 mule was a company which tried to innovate and go beyond into a smartphone market, and that was Sony Ericsson. And we look at who the horse was. The horse is a much more evolved model than a donkey and a mule, and it changed the whole VBE model here. And that horse was Apple. And from 2000 to 2002 to 2004, they were into this MP3 players, where they had innovated from 1999 to 2004. And they had come up with iPod systems. and they changed the VBE without a paradigm shift. So around 2007, they came into the phone market to change the VBE model. And prior to Apple, when you sold a phone, it was a 100% transaction. But when Apple came in, their VBE model was when you sold a phone, it was only 70 to 95% transaction. The rest, 5 to 30% transaction was after sales. So it was app stores, music, and so on, which was sold after a phone was sold. So they changed the whole VBE model there, and that's why we call it a horse. And this was the situation in 2016. And Nokia went from being the topmost company holding 40% of market share to being bankrupt, and it was sold to Microsoft. So that is the power of VBE models. And because Apple rearranged the VBE model, there was nothing Nokia or the other phone makers could throw at Apple. So the value model was changed from phone to phones and use. And the business model was the internet, and the ecosystem was the app stores and the iTunes, phone, and so on, phone music, and so on. So they created a whole VBE model around this. So how should you look at your VBE model? How is your company's VBE model going to change? Can you see in the future and look at how it will evolve? Think. Hope you liked this presentation, and thanks for watching.